If you wanted to build the most profitable business in human history, what would you sell? Tech? Oil? Software? Nope, that is not going to happen. Those businesses require factories, supply chains, and massive R&D. But if you want a business with infinite scaling, zero product costs, and a customer base that will literally die to protect your brand, then you don't sell a product. You divide people on the basis of their religion and profit in chaos.
Chaos is a ladder.
For thousands of years, the most lucrative business model on earth hasn't been trade. It has been the weaponization of God. From the ancient merchant kingdoms to modern Silicon Valley, billionaires and politicians have figured out a dark truth. A united population demands better wages, health care, and accountability. But a religiously divided population? They just want to destroy each other. And while the masses fight over who goes to heaven, the men in suits are laughing all the way to the bank. Welcome to the business of divided religion. In this video, we'll expose how religious outrage became one of the world's most profitable industries. We'll uncover how the British East India Company used divide and rule to turn communities against each other, how television and social media transformed religious conflict into a billion-dollar business. By the end of this video, you'll never look at the news or your neighbor the exact same way again. If you want to keep uncovering how money, power, and influence really shape the world, drop a like, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe. Now let's get into it. To understand how this business works, we have to look at the blueprint designed by the world's first hypercorporation, the British East India Company. In the mid-1700s, India was an economic superpower. It was the jewel of global trade, producing nearly a quarter of the world's entire GDP. India had everything. It had spices, textiles, precious metals, and massive agricultural output. The British wanted that wealth. But when they arrived, they faced a glaring mathematical problem. How could a few thousand English clerks, merchants, and soldiers possibly control a subcontinent of hundreds of millions of people? If the locals ever realized their collective strength, the British would be swept into the sea in a week. The solution the British devised wasn't a military strategy. It was a masterclass in sociological manipulation that we now call divide and rule. Before the British took total control, the Indian subcontinent was incredibly complex. Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs lived, traded, and governed together. Yes, there were conflicts, but borders were fluid, and identities were layered. A weaver in Bengal might be Muslim, but he worked for a Hindu merchant, and they both paid taxes to a local ruler. They were economically bound to one another. The East India Company realized that this unity was the greatest threat to their profit margins. So they began to systematically dismantle it. When the British Crown fully took over and conducted their first major census in 1881, they didn't just count people. They forced Indians to rigidly categorize themselves by religion. Suddenly, fluid community identities were hardened into legal boxes. Then came the true masterstroke, the Morley-Minto reforms of 1909. The British introduced separate electorates. This meant that Muslims could only vote for Muslim candidates, and Hindus could only vote for Hindu candidates. Think about the psychological impact of that. Overnight, your neighbor of a different faith was no longer your partner in the local economy. They were your political rival. The British started selectively favoring one community over the other for civil service jobs, army posts, and land grants, constantly switching their favoritism to keep both sides paranoid, jealous, and angry. They funded radical religious schools to ensure the next generation hated each other even more. But why go through all this effort? Because it was the perfect distraction. As long as a Hindu farmer blamed a Muslim worker for his poverty, and as long as a Muslim merchant feared a Hindu uprising, neither of them looked up. Neither of them noticed the British ships quietly leaving the ports, carrying an estimated $45 trillion of Indian wealth back to London to build their own empire. Religion was the smokescreen. Corporate extraction was the fire. The British didn't invent religious tension, but they industrialized it. They turned it into a business. And the most terrifying part? The business outlived the corporation. When the British were finally forced to leave in 1947, the societal fractures they had engineered violently tore the subcontinent apart. It birthed the bloody partition that created modern-day India and Pakistan, a division that cost millions of lives and ignited a geopolitical conflict that still defines the region today. Britain walked away with the profits, leaving over 1 billion people to endlessly fight a ghost that was created in a London boardroom. But the East India Company wasn't a historical anomaly. They were just perfecting a formula that powerful elites had used for centuries. Historically, whenever there was immense profit on the line, religion was the easiest tool for market control. During the Fourth Crusade in the 13th century, the merchants of Venice used a holy war as an excuse to sack the Christian city of Constantinople, purely to eliminate their biggest trade competitor. During the devastating religious wars of 16th century Europe, elite bankers and arms dealers amassed legendary fortunes by financing both the Catholic and Protestant armies. The ruling class has always known that piety is profitable if you know how to leverage it. Fast forward to the 21st century. In Lower Manhattan, a Sufi imam and a real estate developer bought an old, damaged building 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center site. Their plan was to build Park 51, a 13-story community center open to the public. It was essentially going to be a YMCA. It had plans for a basketball court, a culinary school, a 9/11 memorial, and yes, a prayer space for local Muslims. Initially, nobody cared. It passed local zoning boards easily. It was a mundane local real estate project. But then, right-wing political bloggers found out about it, and the massive corporate cable news networks realized they had struck gold. Overnight, the media completely rebranded a community center with a basketball court into the Ground Zero Victory Mosque. The news networks stopped covering the economy or healthcare. Instead, they ran wall-to-wall, 24/7 coverage of this building. They created terrifying graphics featuring the Twin Towers burning right next to Islamic symbols. They constructed a primetime coliseum. Night after night, the networks would put a screaming, right-wing politician in one box on the screen and a fundamentalist cleric in the other box, and let them battle it out for an hour. The narrative was simple and terrifying. Your sacred ground is being conquered by the enemy. Did the media executives in their glass corner offices actually care about the zoning permits in Lower Manhattan? No. What they cared about was the math. During the summer of 2010, as the media whipped the American public into a frenzy of religious paranoia, cable news ratings skyrocketed. Millions of anxious, angry citizens were glued to their televisions, terrified for their country's soul. And because viewership was so high, the networks were able to charge massive premiums to the companies running commercials during the commercial breaks. The politicians got free airtime to scare voters right before the midterm elections. The media executives raked in millions in ad revenue. But what about the public? Because of this manufactured, televised outrage, anti-Muslim hate crimes spiked across the country. Mosques in other states that had nothing to do with New York were vandalized. Neighbors looked at each other with intense suspicion. The news networks had successfully turned religious division into a highly lucrative spectator sport. The problem didn't end with television. Silicon Valley took the same model, put it into our pockets, and turned it into a weapon of mass psychological manipulation. To understand exactly how dangerous this became, you don't need to look at a conspiracy theory. You just need to look at the math. Specifically, the math behind a tiny red digital face. In 2017, Facebook's engineering team tweaked the algorithm that controls the news feed for billions of people. They introduced a new set of reaction emojis so you could do more than just like a post. But they didn't treat all human emotions equally. Behind the scenes, the algorithm was programmed to give the angry emoji 5 times the weight of a standard like. Why? Because Facebook's internal data showed a simple biological truth. Anger keeps you online. If a post about a neighboring community doing something nice makes you happy, you smile, leave a like, and keep scrolling. But if a post claims that a rival religious group is plotting to destroy your culture, your heart rate spikes. You stop scrolling. You dive into the comments to argue. You share the post to warn your friends. by mathematically rewarding anger. The algorithm transformed the internet into a global outrage machine. And the real-world consequences were devastating. Take the tragic case of Myanmar in 2017. In Myanmar, the internet essentially was Facebook. The app came pre-installed on phones and was the primary source of news for the entire country. When military actors and radical nationalist groups started posting virulently fake, anti-Muslim propaganda targeting the Rohingya minority, the algorithm didn't see hate speech. It just saw incredibly high engagement. People were reacting with anger, arguing, and sharing. So, the algorithm proactively amplified these posts, pushing them into the feeds of millions of users who weren't even looking for them. The result? Amnesty International and the United Nations both issued reports concluding that Meta's algorithms substantially contributed to an actual genocide. Real villages were burned. Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya refugees were forced to flee for their lives. But while Myanmar burned, Facebook's engagement metrics soared, and the company continued to sell highly profitable targeted advertising. And this wasn't an isolated glitch in a single country. In 2021, whistleblower Frances Haugen leaked internal documents, known as the Facebook Papers, proving that the company knew their algorithms were pouring gasoline on religious and political strife globally. Their own data scientists warned executives that political parties in places like India, Spain, and Poland were literally forced to change their messaging to be more negative, hateful, and sensationalist just to survive the algorithm. In India, WhatsApp, also owned by Meta, became a super spreader of fake videos designed to stoke Hindu-Muslim tensions, leading to actual mob lynchings in the streets. But fixing the algorithm to promote calm, nuanced discussion would reduce engagement. And reducing engagement hurts the stock price. The tech executives sat in pristine, air-conditioned boardrooms in California, watching their stock prices hit record highs, while the algorithmic monster they created turned working-class neighbors against each other across the globe. Every time you see an extreme religious video online, ask yourself, is this actually threatening you? Or is it trying to provoke your outrage? Your angry comments don't stop it, they help it. Every reply boosts engagement, pushing the video to more people. The platform profits. The extremist gets more reach. You think you're defending your faith, but your reaction may be helping spread the very message you're fighting against.